Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Frank Martela, and he's here to share with us his new book, A Wonderful Life: Insights on Finding a Meaningful Existence. So have you ever questioned what brings significance to our existence? In a series of essays that explore this notion, scholar Frank Martela tackles why we have this longing beyond the present moment and an insatiable dissatisfaction with where we are, while sharing on the subject of finding meaning in life. So Frank is a philosopher and researcher of psychology specializing in the question of meaning in life. His articles have appeared in Scientific American Mind and Salon, and his work has been featured on Quartz and the BBC. His research published extensively in numerous academic journals, such as Journal of Personality, Journal of Positive Psychology, Journal of Happiness Studies, and many more. He's been interviewed by the New York Times, Fitness, Vice News, Monocle Observer, among many others, and he joins us today from Helsinki. So let's welcome to the show, Frank Martela.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. And I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
So I've been studying the topic for more than 10 years already. So I guess I don't know where the original spark to study the topic came from. I guess I was always interested in the big questions, and I felt that somehow what could be the bigger question in human life than trying to figure out the meaning of life. So that's what I tried to study, and now I felt, after having studied it quite a long time, that somehow the pieces started to fit together, and I felt that now is the time to try to take all I've learned about the topic through my research and put them in the book format in order to deliver the insights to other people.
Well, it's really fascinating because, it's been eons. People have been asking the question about, how life has meaning and what's the meaning of life. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that history with our listeners.
So one interesting fact that I found out when I was when I started get interested in the history of the topic was that even though we think about the meaning of life as some kind of question that has been asked since the dawn of the mankind, actually the phrase itself, the meaning of life, is quite a recent invention. So it was actually only in the 19th century when we started to ask the question in the modern form. And the first person to use the phrase in English language seems to be Thomas Carlyle, who was this Scottish author who wrote this book Sartor Resartus in 1834. And in that book, there's the first time that the phrase meaning of life was used. And Carlyle was very influential in the 19th century. So lots of different writers took inspiration from him, including Charles Dickens and Herman Melville and John Stuart Mill and so forth. People who are inspired by Carlyle is almost like a who's who of 19th century intellectual thinkers. And in that sense, I guess that he was the one who introduced the topic to the English-speaking audience. And the reason why we needed this kind of phrase at that point in history, I guess it comes down to the rise of the scientific worldview. That before that, the meaningfulness of our lives had been more certain. That we had already that it was so certain and so self-evident that human life existed for a purpose that we didn't even have a phrase for that because we didn't think about any alternative. But then suddenly, when the scientific worldview was getting more dominant in the late 18th and early 19th century, suddenly people became aware that hey, if we follow the scientific thinking and see human beings as these, products of evolution, which are just accidentally exist, and the world around us is dominated by these natural laws, and human movement and everything is just like part of this, like this more mechanistic universe, and the universe around us is vast, that we suddenly learn that, that this our solar system is just one among others. There's like millions of other stars in our galaxy, and there's millions of other galaxies around the universe. And also in that time, like people start learning the history, like the length of the history. So geological thinking was getting through. So people realized that the world hasn't like existed just a few millennia, as perhaps had been taught before, but actually the world stretches like millions of years before us, and it will last millions of years after us. So all that kind of like somehow led to a situation where the human existence suddenly seemed quite like brief, random, accidental thing. And because of that, like people were like losing touch with this sense of self-evident sense that life has a purpose. And at that point, then they needed the phrase to describe what they felt that they were lacking. And that was like when the phrase meaning of life was born.
Well, thank you for taking the time to break that down for us and share that with us, because when you put it into that perspective, it really is very interesting. When you look at the bigger picture, I'm sure many people go, okay, well then how is the meaning of life meaningful to me now?
Yeah, and that's like kind of one of the key points of my book is that make this distinction between two different kind of questions about meaning. So there's the question about meaning of life, which is exactly this question about like, does life as such have some kind of like purpose or meaning to it? Is there like some like external purpose to all human life or life on Earth? And that's the question that the scientific worldview was kind of like challenging, and like where people felt that they were losing touch with this sense, with this meaning of life. But at the same time, there's this another question, the question about meaning in life. So the question about, which is more like, I would say, psychological question. It's more a question about whether I experience my own life as meaningful, and whether the moments that I'm having, the things that I'm doing, whether they feel meaningful to me. So that's like more personal, more psychological question. And if you read the book, I guess like one has to, for those who hasn't like yet read my book, I have to say that actually I cannot solve the question of meaning of life in the book. That I don't provide like any ultimate answer to the question of meaning of life, but I rather focus more on the question of meaning in life. That where do human beings usually find what are the things that they usually find meaningful in their own lives? And as regards that question, I think actually scientific research, especially psychological research, can be of great help, because through studying what people on average, like what people usually get meaningfulness from, we can like derive these, like what are the key themes that usually make life meaningful for most of us. And that's what I try to do in the book, that boil down the usual sources of meaningfulness to 4 key points through which most of us lives tend to become more meaningful.
So if we look at it from the psychological aspect, what are a couple of the points that you can share with us that point people towards a life of meaning? Because I think now, especially with what we're going through with the COVID, people are having to dive inward more so now than ever.
Yeah, I agree that like these times of crisis are usually times when people become like more aware of their values and start to more question their life choices and start to ask what is really valuable in life and what they really want to do with their lives. So in that sense, I would think that the question of meaning is right now more relevant than it was, like, for example, a year ago when I was writing the book. So like, because of the crisis, more people are asking about the topic of meaning and trying to figure out where could they get some meaningfulness to their lives. And I figured like how to address this kind of crisis. When the crisis started, I actually like went to my bookshelf and took out a couple of books on like Stoic philosophy, like ancient Stoic philosophy, because I felt that they usually have like quite good answers to these questions, like how to cope with crisis, how to cope with suffering. And one of the takeaways from those books was that one of the key things that they emphasize is this acceptance of life as it is. And like they say that, that there's many things in life which we cannot which we cannot change. They just happen. And because of that, worrying about them and fighting against them is like, that doesn't make any sense, because like we anyways cannot like fight against them. And for example, this like coronavirus is a perfect example of that kind of thing, that, what no matter what I do, I cannot I cannot fix the world economy. I cannot like make the virus not spread through the communities. So there's like many things right now which are happening, which are like beyond my control. And as regards those things, the only thing that we can do is kind of like just try to accept them as they come. And at the same time, it's like also important that trying to figure out what are the things which are still under my control, which are the things that I can still influence and have like some control over, and identifying those things, no matter how small they are, and then like trying to like influence those in a positive direction. That's like, I guess, like one recipe through which to try to stay sane and like in action throughout this kind of crisis. So like, accept those things that you cannot like influence, and focus on those things that actually you can actually influence, and try to make a difference there, and concentrate on making that difference, to concentrate your actions on making that kind of difference. So if you have like much resources, you can probably make a bigger impact. So then go ahead and do that. If you have less resources, the impact you can have is perhaps like only that you can like save yourself or like help your family or those people close to you. But even that is enough. If do the best out of whatever you have in your situation available, and that's like already enough for like meaningful existence in a situation like this crisis.
Do you feel in times of crisis that we've been talking about that people are actually able to really focus on what truly matters? Because I think a lot of times, we get so consumed by what's on TV, what's coming through over the phone, just from the digital aspect, that we kind of lose sight of what's really important.
Yeah, I think like that's like the modern media environment probably is not the best for our like mental health, or for our like ability to concentrate on those things that matter. So like, because like through media we tend to like worry about things that we actually don't have any control over, and we like most of our time is like spent on getting information about things that actually actually are things that we cannot like influence in any ways. So instead, like, it's like, of course it's a good idea to like stay in touch with what is happening in the world to some degree, but I think like we spend too much time on like social media, and it becomes like a bit like ruminating, and we don't get much out of it actually. So instead having some sense of what is happening around oneself, but then like closing the media and concentrating on things close to hand. What are the things I can do through my work in this situation? What can I do as a father in my case? What can I do as a friend? What can I do to my relatives in this situation? Concentrate on kind of the real life instead of like what is like mediated by the media.
I agree with you so much, and I felt like your book had so much great information for people that are asking these questions right now. And one of the questions that I felt that was real important that you also talk about is, about the topic of happiness. And so, should happiness be like our goal, or should we be looking for something else?
Yeah, so happiness, of course, like it's a topic that I've been like doing quite much research on, and also like Finland is nowadays, according to this World Happiness Report, the happiest country in the world. But at the same time, actually, like I think that happiness actually is not so good as a goal in life. So of course, like I don't have like nothing against like happiness as such. Of course, it's nicer to be happy than to be unhappy. But at the same time, it doesn't work well as a goal. There's even like research showing that those people who are most obsessed with their own happiness, who most try to like optimize their happiness levels, those people actually are less happy than other people. And the reason for this is that like if you focus too much on your own happiness, you might become like too self-absorbed, and like you lose touch with your friendships and lose touch with those people close to you, because like you're all the time thinking only about yourself, and that's usually bad for your happiness, because we know from research that happiness quite much comes from those close relationships. But at the same time, also like, just by focusing on your own happiness, you make yourself less able to enjoy life as it is happening, because you're all the time thinking that, okay, this thing made me quite happy. Why didn't it make me even happier? I have a work, it makes me happy, but could there be some other work that could make me even more happier? I have a wife, she makes me happy, but could there be some other wife who would make me even more happier? And if you're all the time like contemplating and ruminating on these kind of things, you're not able to enjoy the life as it happened. You're not able to enjoy the moments that you're actually having, and because of that, then you lose your happiness by focusing too much on it. So it's kind of like a paradox that happiness is one of those things in life that are best approached kind of like indirectly by concentrating on doing certain kind of things. I would argue that if you concentrate on doing things meaningful to you, if you concentrate on connecting with other people and making like meaningful relationships with others, then happiness comes kind of like a side product without you having to think about the topic of happiness itself so much. So like concentrate on meaningful things and the happiness comes without you having to think about it.
Well, and it will get you in a lot less trouble thinking about having a different wife too, right?
Yeah.
Well, in your book, you talk about live your life not as a project, but as a story. And I'd love for you to kind of expand on that. What does that mean?
Yeah, I feel that the modern way that we think about our life is a bit like too project-oriented, that we tend to think about our lives as some kind of like project with certain like goals that we need to achieve. And like we feel that, that unless we achieve those goals, we have like failed in life, that our like identity, our like self-esteem, all is like tied up with like whether we accomplish those goals that we set for ourselves. And this makes like, and the problem is that, that when people then like finally after years of toiling away, when they finally get to their goal, usually they feel that, hey, my life actually isn't so different after I achieved this grand goal of mine. And they might even feel that, they have been like cheated in some way, that, hey, I put so much effort in like getting here, and now I am here, and nothing really changed for myself. And there's of course like, another way of like thinking about life is more that it's kind of like a story that is unfolding. So in a good story, there are like, there's some obstacles, there's like, good things happening, there's bad things happening, there's like joy, there's sorrow. A story involves like all kinds of emotions, all kinds of things. And it's just something that like unfolds. So like think about our lives more as a story. It's like, I think it's a more healthy way of thinking about our life, because this project orientedness might like make us less able to like, be in touch with our own lives, because like we're all too much like focusing on the future, focusing on something that is not there, instead of like enjoying what is already there in our lives. So I think that, it would be healthy to somehow like, counter this like too project oriented way of thinking about life, so that we could like actually start enjoying the life as such more.
I can agree with you more on that. I mean, I've worked in positions where with different companies where you hit certain goals and reach certain levels, and then you get there and you've got all the awards and all the accolades, and it's a box full of stuff that you really don't really care about, So I think your book I found to be so profound because it allows people to really dig into what's more important.
Yeah, and also like even beyond work, that even now like free time has become like more and more a project. That when people nowadays start a hobby, if they start jogging, they have to run a marathon under 3 hours, like preferably. If they start like whatever hobby that they start, it has to be like, very like they have to set some goals for themselves and then like accomplish those goals. So you cannot just like enjoy a round of golf, but you have to have like, some goal that you're trying to get your like swing into certain somehow perfect it and so forth. And I think that, so our work is very project oriented, but even our life outside of work is very project oriented. Even like having children nowadays has become like more of a project, that, that one is not just there for the kids, but one is that they are kind of like little projects of oneself, and one is somehow like trying to make sure that the kids accomplish something, because then you feel that you have yourself accomplished something.
I love in your... No, go ahead.
Yeah, so and then like this Alan W. Watts, I quote him in the book at one point, because I really love his idea that, he said, as regards this topic, that he said that instead of thinking about life as like this project, we should think about this like a musical piece, a symphony or a song, because like when you think about the symphony or a song, then kind of getting to the end point of that song is not the point of it. The point of music is not to get to the final notes as fast as possible. But the point of music is more something that happens during the music, when the music is playing. So like this Alan W. Watts is saying that, we should think about our lives as music. And as long as the music is still playing, we should just sing and dance. And that's it. That's like the kind of like more healthy attitude towards life.
I couldn't agree with you more, because when you look at life in that way, I mean, how beautiful is that? Because yes, it has the high notes and the low notes, but it's, a lot of times people get into some great judgment about those low notes that they have that may keep them stuck.
Yeah, and I feel that actually this like happiness culture of ours is kind of like unhealthy in that way as well, because when we make happiness a goal in our society, when we feel that everybody should be happy, it means that that when you are unhappy, it's like it's a double the burden, because not only are you unhappy, but also you feel that you have like somehow failed to achieve the standard that the society has set for you. That you have like not only like you're not only unhappy, but also like somehow failed in being happy. But of course, like when we think about human life, all lives involve moments of happiness and moments of sadness. Like nobody goes through life without being unhappy at certain points. So like, kind of the story approach to life is like more about like seeing life as this rich wholeness, which includes both like good things and bad things, and then like just accepting that that's how life is. That's like how our life will unfold. That there will be these painful moments, there will be like sadness, and that's all part of the grand story of life.
That's more of an adult way of looking at how life shapes itself, as opposed to maybe just kind of living in a bubble, thinking that it's just going to be all instant gratification and roses. And it's interesting. I love how in your book you talk about money, because a lot of times people look at money and think, well, if I'm really, really wealthy, then I could be happy. Or if I have an X amount of financial success, then my life will be in a way that brings me ultimate happiness. And I think, your book kind of says it really well. It talks about that.
Yeah. So as regards happiness, I would say that, lack of money can make you unhappy, but money rarely makes you happy. So like, that when people are living in poverty, that usually has like a negative effect on their happiness, because then they're lacking the basic necessities in life. They're like, if you don't have food on the table, if you don't have like anywhere to live, of course, that's going to have like a negative effect on your happiness. So like, lack of money, when you really don't have that much, then that usually like has an impact on people's happiness levels. But the more money one has, like the less positive effect additional money will have. That research has shown time and time again that that the relationship between money and happiness is kind of like, it's this like curve where like in the beginning they're like very strongly correlated, but beyond a certain point, extra money no longer seems to buy any happiness to oneself. So like because like after a certain point, you can take care of the basic necessities, and then like other factors beyond money are become like more dominant as regards how happy or unhappy you are. And even like if you're striving too much for happiness, you might make like choices in life that actually make you more unhappy. For example, like staying at work for too long hours, and because of that, neglecting your family and other close relationships, your friendships, and so forth, which are things that usually make people unhappy if they're not able to spend time with their loved ones and with the people close to them.
While you were doing the research for this book, did you find anything that really either inspired you or surprised you?
I guess like there's many things. One thing that at one point when I was like thinking about what is like the answer to the question of meaning, what are the things that make life meaningful, At one point, my answer was as follows, because I boiled it down to one sentence, because sometimes I was in a situation where people were asking me that, hey, you're the philosopher, now tell me what is the meaning of life. And for those situations, I thought that, I want to have this one sentence answer ready for them. And my answer was, meaning in life is about making yourself meaningful to other people. So the way you make your life meaningful or experience your life meaningful is when you feel that you somehow are meaningful to other people. And I thought that there's two parts to that. The first way that my life is meaningful to other people is that I'm meaningful to those people who are close to me. So close relationships was one key component of meaningfulness. And lots of research show that that's actually true. That when people are asked to say what makes your life meaningful, what most people start to talk about first and foremost is their family or a certain family member or their close friendships. And then the other way that one can make oneself meaningful to other people is through contributing, through having a positive impact in the life of other people. And that's also a topic that I've been researching myself and having some empirical studies where we actually shown that when people are able to have this even quite a small contribution towards other people, somehow feel that they have helped other people, that tends to increase their own sense of happiness and their own sense of meaningfulness. So that was for a long time I answered the question, where does meaningfulness come from? I said that it comes from other people. It comes from contributing. It comes from close relationships. But then at one point I realized that actually this was only half the answer to the question to where meaningfulness comes from. And the moment the realization came when I was reading this book by William Damon, who is one of the key psychologists who has studied the topic of purpose and meaning. And he told about this surgeon that he had met, and the surgeon happened to be one of topmost experts on certain heart surgery, which meant that he went to work in the morning, he did a couple of surgeries, he came back home and said, okay, again, I saved a human life. So he was saving human lives on a regular basis through his work. So one might think that, there couldn't be much more meaningful occupation than occupation where one is actually able to help other people and save human lives on a regular basis. But this person was actually feeling very bad about his work. He had hard time getting out of bed in the morning, and he really felt that he is actually hating his job. And the reason he hated his job was because he felt that it's not his thing, that he had chosen to he had chosen to go to medical school because his parents said that, hey, you should go to medical school. In the medical school, the teacher said that, hey, you should become a surgeon. So he did that. But he had never stopped to think what he really himself wants to do with his life. So he has always followed the lead of others and not thought about what he himself wants to do. And when he finally stopped and thought about that, he realized that he wants to do something completely different. So in the end, he had quit his career there and start in a completely different field. And now what I took away from that story is that actually, in order to feel that your life is meaningful, it's not enough that you connect with other people. You also have to connect with yourself. So that's the other dimension of meaningfulness. That it's not only about other people, connecting with other people, but also connecting with yourself, which means that it is about the sense of authenticity, knowing who you are and making sure that you're able to do the things that are close to your heart, things that you find interesting, that you find valuable, making sure that you make life choices that are that come from yourself and are not just responding to the demands of your parents or the demands of the society at large, but more thinking who you are, what you want to do in life, and making sure that you're doing that thing. So in that sense, nowadays, how I try to boil down to meaningfulness is that there's these two things. That first, figure out what are the activities and things that you find meaningful. And when you have figured that out, then figure out a way of doing those activities in a way that connects yourself with other people. So connect first with yourself, and then through that connect with others. And then you already should feel that your life is already quite meaningful.
Yeah, they often talk about, and I'm sure in your book you've got such great examples, and you go through so much detail. It was such a wonderful resource and such a great read. Really talks
Thank you.
about how making those. Oh, you're welcome. And talks about how making these connections really are beneficial, and in many ways, one of the things that stuck out to me was like, oh gosh, of course that's true. We look at how we're experiencing like an erosion of community in Western society, and it's something that we need to correct.
Yeah, I guess like in the book I tell the story when I was like, I think it was some almost 10 years ago. I was traveling in Nicaragua in Central America. I was like traveling there alone for like a couple of months, and at one point I went to this east coast of Nicaragua, and there was this one village there that was like not only accessible by boat, so there wasn't like any roads or anything that you take you there, but only you could get there only by boat. So I went to the village and like stayed there for 1 week, and it was like really interesting like experience being there, because like the people, it was like, I don't think there was like perhaps like around 1,000 people living in that village. And my first night there, I befriended one local guy who was like quite much the same age as me, and I hang with him like the next couple of days quite much. And when we were walking to like the streets of the village, like every third person who he was like every third person who we met seemed to be his cousin. I don't know like how large like the concept of cousin there was, but like it still I felt that that it's quite like remarkable way of living, that that he's living in the village, the same village where his parents are living, where he's like all his relatives are living, where the kids that he grew up, they are living in the same place, and he's probably going to get old in that village and die in that village and get buried in the same graveyard as like other people around him. So certain like rootedness in the community that he had available to him is something that I was like kind of like envying from him, because of course like our modern lifestyle means that the people, my parents are living like further away from me, my brother and sister, we live in the same city, but we are not like still not seeing like every day in the same way as he's seeing his like his siblings and other close ones. So in a way, like there's like certain beauty in that kind of lifestyle that we have like lost through this modern lifestyle where we are more mobile and moving around. And because of that, like we have to like be like more aware of like how are we building these communities in the modern world? How are we making sure that we also have like these like long-term friendships, and how are we like maintaining them? So it requires more of a conscious effort to like uphold this friendship that it was there, where you like you don't have to put much effort into that, because you basically meet these people like every day, like just by randomly, because you live next door to each other.
Well, Frank, my goodness, we could talk forever on your book, A Wonderful Life. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
So I'm on Twitter, like I'm on Facebook, and I have this homepage like frankmartela.com. So these are like few ways to get in contact with me. Book itself is like found in basically all the usual places where books are found.
Oh, yeah. Your book's available everywhere, which is awesome. And of course, on Kindle, so people can pick it up on Kindle too. Well, Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thanks for a great talk.
Well, thank you, Frank. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, A Wonderful Life: Insights on Finding a Meaningful Existence. A Wonderful Life is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. You'll want to stay tuned for our next special guest who coined the term the final eighth, describing a phenomenon she experienced and observed in others who are talented, energetic, motivated people accomplishing many steps to their goals and then mysteriously stalling. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, and she's here to share with us her new book, The Final Eighth: Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals. Now, Bridgit is an author and founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute. She is a former performer who earned her master's degree from Columbia University and teaches at numerous professional settings, including Omega Institute. So let's welcome to the show, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard.
Hi, great to be here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. Oh my goodness. So I picked up this book, and once I started reading it, I was like, my goodness, I wish I had this book 20 years ago, because it would have made a big, huge change in my game.
Me too.
Well, Tina, so I have to ask you, like, what inspired you to write The Final Eighth?
I have done many things in my life, and so I definitely feel that wherever we are, we can take advantage of where we've been before. So by the time I got to being a psychotherapist and life coach in private practice, I'd been a performer, an improviser, and like fitness instructor. And so I had a lot of skills going in, and then I got clinical training. And I would support my clients in whatever they came to deal with. But I began to notice there was a particular thing that happened. And it came out of me. And I said to myself, that's a final eighth issue. And it didn't matter whether the person was male or female, whether it was someone in the creative field or a lawyer. They would get so close to their goal. And I knew them to be dedicated, talented, hardworking folks because I had been working with them. So they weren't delusional about that. And then they would suddenly stall literally in front of their own finish line that they cared so deeply about and worked so hard for. And it jumped out at me like, wow, this is the final eighth. Here's, again, someone who's done 7/8 of the work there and just stops and it's a mystery. Like, I'm not sure why. They certainly didn't know why. And that's how it jumped out.
Oh my gosh, I love that because, you know, a lot of people do that. I've done that in my life where you work real hard, you've got a goal in mind, and you're doing all this work, and then all of a sudden you're just like, you know, I think I'm done. And it was fascinating to read how you discovered this. I'd like for you to share a little bit with us. You know, in your book, you talk about many different things that kind of led you to this. One of the things you brought up was voice dialogue. And I'd love for you to share with us what that is and how does that work?
So voice dialogue is a revolutionary method created by my mentors, Hal and Sidra Stone. And it's a technique where you dialogue with different aspects of yourself. We could call them alter egos, subpersonalities, inner selves, personas. But the idea is that they each speak from their own point of view. And then you get to realize that all parts, no matter what their function in your life currently, have the noble purpose of protecting your vulnerability. So you're more able to embrace all the parts of yourself. And ultimately, then you get to enlist the alter ego that's got the right superpower for the particular part of the goal that you have in mind. And I stumbled on voice dialogue absolutely through synchronicity. I actually read about it in a different book, and it just electrified me. And it talked about the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone, and that you have different parts, and that their way of exploring yourself is literally to let the parts talk from their point of view. So then you already know that whatever part you're leading with does not have the whole view. So I literally hunted them down. In those days, it was the 1-800 number. And I ended up training with them. They became my mentors. And at the time, I found it also helpful because I was a performer in New York City and a comic and a writer. And I loved how it gave me access to different energies. So you could also use voice dialogue literally as a creativity tool. I could explore a character in a play. Maybe I'm used to being in my good girl energy, but the play required I was in a sassy, confrontational type of energy. But the more I learned about voice dialogue and became trained as a facilitator, the more I was absolutely blown away by its healing power. Just learning that you're more than you think you are, and so startlingly swiftly. I also was amazed at how quickly and deeply people went into their bigger sense of who they were.
Oh my goodness. I love how you explain that. And with your background, I mean, you get it just like this, and you explain it in a way that I think people can really relate to, because a lot of times if we talk about, my inner selves, in, plural, you're thinking, oh, I need a padded room if I'm talking to inner selves, not realizing like how great it could be.
Well, that's the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up, is that the Dr. Stone, but really Jung, early psychoanalysts from way back when have said a healthy personality consists of many selves. And the terror is that you're crazy, right? The padded room. And so people still ask about Sybil or the three faces of Eve. And that's now called dissociative identity disorder. And it's a terrible and a sad disorder that's absolutely just out of trauma. It's trauma-based. And so people get confused, and I understand their fear, like, oh, I don't want to be crazy. And once you allay that fear, no, you are going to be empowered and have access to your magic. But that's very different than crazy.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, we looked at, in the example that you gave, I think is perfect, because we look at actors, and actors immerse themselves into a character and bring out those strengths and bring out those pieces that they're looking to accomplish for a certain role. I would think that the same thing can happen here with voice dialogue.
That's exactly right. And sometimes I'm like, you need your CEO selves during the day, but when you come home, your CEO selves will wreak havoc with your family and intimate life. And the empowered person has access to both. It's never either or through voice dialogue lens. And I love that.
Okay, so when we are enlisting our inner selves to help accomplish a goal, how does that work?
So we first define the goal, and then maybe we list the parts of ourselves that are involved with the goal. And in my book, I do guide readers step by step how to go through this process, so that you literally go to another part of the room, so that when you embody a self, you go to a different part of the room, because the idea is to separate yourself from these parts of yourself, so you can get to know them better and have access to them from your center, so that you can have your CEO when you need her, but you can have, soft and fuzzy parent when you need her. And so in the book, I have a list of questions to choose from, and you ask that self questions. What are your early memories? What function do you serve? What is your opinion about Bridget's final eighth goal? And you talk about yourself in the third person. And the other thing about these selves is you never want to get rid of them, and they all have wisdom. And a lot of the resistant selves, I would invite resistant itself to come in. The resistant self will tell you what it cares about. And often they are bringing up really good points. And so if you deal with their concerns directly, whether it's feeling like you're going to be so exhausted you might trigger an episode of an illness or something, that part actually has a legitimate concern. And so instead of running away from the resistant self or a part that feels inept, you listen to it. Maybe that inept part is just insulting you and it needs to be corrected, that you are actually skilled enough. But maybe it's right. Maybe you do need to ask your techie friend, can you just give me a really slow way to get myself good at Zoom, for example. So when you really listen and then you discern, is this a legitimate hole in my plan that this part is worried about? And if it is, you thank them for noticing it and then you deal.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know in your book you talk about aspects like the inner critic. Why is that so important, having that, where I think sometimes people get that confused with like a lot of negative chatter?
Exactly. And I guess I would say there's no such thing as negative chatter per se. I would say, let's go to that part of you that you say is doing all this negative chatter. And then when you go to the part that's, let's just say, negative chatter, and you let that part chatter, well, this sucks and here's why, and this will never work out, and I know, and let me give you exact examples. And you look where that part is in your body. And those are some of the questions. How does this part breathe? What does this part believe? What is this part's idea of its secret to success? And so you find out. And so because many parts of us are actually painful, they're negative in that way. They don't feel good. But that doesn't mean they don't have a really important function in your life. And they have both a gift and a sting, as do all selves. So the inner critic, you'd ask itself, and these are some questions directly from my book, where you'd ask any inner self, what's your function? What's your key to success? So maybe some people's very good key to success is work really hard. But for a lot of people at their 7/8 point and stuck in that final eighth, working harder is actually not the key. They are working hard. And so their more tender, more vulnerable parts may actually be the direction that they need to go to, like risk maybe asking for help or those kind of things where independent parts refuse to allow them, but they can't cross to the final eighth goal without, say, getting a team together to help them do it. And that's where their actual block is. And so we separate how a self feels, meaning painful or negative, like an inner critic, and we find out, okay, your sting is that, for the inner critic, is that you're too toxic right now. So we say, good, let's not, that inner critic is not allowed to bully you. But what is its gift? And I bring up the inner critic a lot because the inner critic is a brilliant and genius. I don't know about your inner critic, and I'd love to hear, but mine has endless energy to tell me how I'm not measuring up. It's brilliant in monitoring the ways that it's making its point. So if I can hook into the energy of the inner critic and then use it to help me with my final eighth goal, that is a positive, and I would even say detoxed way of using that extraordinary life energy that the inner critic holds, but not supporting formerly negative messages.
Do you feel that people will often use like the inner critic and maybe other excuses to not reach their certain goal?
Absolutely. And I think some of them might be obvious. I talk about addict selves that maybe say, oh, well, let's just relax. It's been such a hard day. And besides, the inner critic maybe has really hurt you through the day by just pushing you beyond your limits. So you're exhausted anyway. So you have that happy hour drink. And then eventually you don't do that extra work you wanted to in the evening. And then you wake up in the morning also feeling bad, maybe a little bit hungover or just not at the top of your game. So that's one way that the selves can make you not do your final eighth goal. But I also think there is something else often going on, which is that we have parts of ourselves that have a distorted loyalty to your early caregivers, that whether it was completely unconscious or not, made those early parts of you believe some type of negative worldview. And they can come in cliches and credos like a fool and his money are soon parted. Well, then you're going to have selves that are afraid to invest in your own education or training, or take a risk in a business, or boys don't cry. So then those parts in that particular male won't have access to those tender parts. And in fact, those parts are unconsciously loyal to making it true, whatever those negative beliefs are. And I think that's part of the problem when you've gone 7/8 of the way there. It literally, those parts that got you there are suddenly in a tug of war standstill between the parts that are like, wait a minute, if there's successes for other people but not you, a lot of my clients carry that one, then you have permission to do 7/8 of the way there, but suddenly going from a contender to an actual victor is too scary for those selves. In other words, they'll have to question their whole worldview. Well, wait a minute, if I actually succeed, then nothing works out is not true. And that can be very destabilizing, especially when it's unconscious. If you know that's what's going on, then you can talk to those parts of yourself and bring yourself up to date, basically.
How many people have grown up hearing that work, life and work is hard. So maybe, one of them can be like, hey, I get 7/8 of the way there on hard work. And if I actually achieve my goal, then, what happens then,
Exactly. I mean, I've talked to many writers who even are somewhat aware that their really completed novel that's in the drawer, they're afraid to give out because they're actually more afraid of the success, that it will go into the world, than the failure of being rejected, because they don't know what to do then. It's truly uncharted territory for a lot of people. And I like to think my book is a map where you can practice safe success.
Well, in your book, you talk about, you really go through, and you mentioned this earlier, you identify all the different selves. Which inner self is really the one that's involved in stopping us from achieving our dreams?
And that's why I think that it's important for everyone to look at their own particular inner selves in relation to whichever goal they're thinking about, because it's different for everybody. And I think the more specific you are about what those selves are, and you can say no, but you've talked about a goal that you got 7/8 of the way there. Would you mind sharing, like, what cells in you do you think were involved in you're not going to the final eighth?
So, I can understand that. A lot of people seem to have the same type of thing, I think, that I've gone through, where maybe it's a fear, or maybe, gosh, we don't know what's going to happen when we get to that final eighth. So, I would probably chalk it up to that.
And that, you're right, a lot of people would have that fear self. And so with voice dialogue, you would talk to that fear self, and you would never ask that fear self to be more brave. You let that self talk about it, what it's scared of. And then usually these selves are very young, some as young as 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And it becomes about self-care. So you take care of that fear self. I've worked with a lot of people who are in final eighth quagmires about getting promoted in their workplace. And I find out that a lot of them have a lot of their 8-year-old selves feeling free to run around at work. And we have to bring them back and have them stay home, including these little scared selves. They don't belong in the arena of the final eighth. So if you have other parts that take care of the scary adult stuff, you can take care of your inner children, basically.
I think that's so important. And I love how you're kind of breaking down where these come from. Because I think a lot of times people are going, okay, well, I've got these inner selves. Where do they come from and what purpose do they serve?
and I like to start at the beginning, which is they start right away in our life. So we're born as an infant, completely vulnerable. And our job as an infant is to attach to our caregiver. It's also the caregiver's job. It's a absolutely healthy, beautiful bonding situation. And so a lot of it is natural if coming from your family, which selves are reinforced or which parts of you. And some of it is temperamental, meaning it's biology. They've done studies that some of hypersensitivity, or actually those that want a ton of excitement, some of that's just literal levels of sensitivity that we're born with. So part of what selves become our primary selves are that. The others are what's reinforced in our family. And then we develop new selves as we develop. So the first time we go to school, we start to have some student selves. And that's how we learn what self is primary in us and then which selves did we have to squelch. But they come from our upbringing. And it's not that we have to stay living in our past, just the opposite. But it's important to know where they come from. So again, you can upgrade their knowledge. Like you don't live in that house anymore. And I guess I should also honor that we're in a COVID era, social change times. And these are times when we can cultivate aspects of ourselves that can change with the times, that have the resilience to deal with whatever your particular family is dealing with, including maybe making some new selves that now is the time to potentially follow your dream about a new business, that maybe now the need is very obvious. And it would be great if you got your final eighth together because the world could really use the gift you have to offer.
I think that's so just empowering for people because they can really use that information to move their life forward. I would assume, with the work that you're doing, as many people as you're coming in contact with, you're probably getting in touch with people and working with people who, work for a certain goal. And after a while, they're like, I'm working for this goal, but this might not really be something I truly deep down want to obtain.
I have an entire chapter devoted to let go of that goal if it does not fit. This book is not at all for just type A personalities. Sometimes it's hard to let go of a goal because you're going to have a loss. Even if it didn't come true, you were in direct relationship with this goal. And so I say sometimes this process does involve grief. But if it doesn't fit, if it really is not yours anymore, if it ever was, I give full permission to let go and then see what comes up, because the energy that you're putting into this stalled goal, that in fact part of the stall might be the message, it's not yours anymore and please let go of it, that frees up energy for whatever might be next. And if the very next things are, I want to take a nap every Saturday for the next 6 Saturdays, I might say, good, that's exactly your plan. A lot of my exercises are quite fun and enjoyable. It's not about all type A doer personalities having their can-do plan be reinforced. My book is kind of the opposite. Like, let's look at the whole.
Well, what if you have somebody that says, hey, that sounds really great, but maybe their lazy self kind of takes over too much. How can they identify, when is the time to have those naps and to really delegate time to personal time and time to work?
I love that question. There are many lazy selves in and amongst us. So one of the things I also bring out when I work with people is the cultural expectations, because we are individuals, but we are within our cultures, within our societies, in our globe. And so even the term lazy in our culture is a negative label. It's something we shouldn't want. Even if we secretly do, we have to pretend we don't, or we actually don't like it. So when we go to the lazy self, again, we find out more about that lazy self. Where do you live in Bridgit's body? What do you like to do? What are you worried about? What's your opinion about the final eighth goal? What's your key to success? So you get to learn directly about that lazy self. And then you come back to center. And having direct knowledge, maybe that lazy self actually has a higher purpose goal, because most selves do. Maybe that lazy self has actually kind of been mislabeled and is really concerned that you're not taking your long-term health, and that means rest, into perspective in your plan. And so you're new relationship with your lazy self is often enough. And you're like, okay, I can't take a nap every Saturday afternoon from now to eternity, but maybe I can take a half-hour nap once a week. And so then you can get into negotiating and using many of the skills we already have that we've learned. That's the other thing about this method, is that I want you to use everything you've learned from millions of years ago till today. But sometimes we don't have access to those goals or those techniques because the self that's involved doesn't want you to use them. In other words, if the lazy self is concerned that you're not taking your long-term health seriously, it's going to make you kind of tired, and then you'll forget to organize your day. But once you're in direct relationship, then that part of you that's learned skills to do whatever it is you need to do can actually use them. And so I often tell people after this process, it's like you get access to these skills you spent a lot of time and money getting before you had this voice dialogue approach in the final eighth way to look at things.
So do you have a story you can share with us from somebody who has really kind of overcome, being at that seventh, eighth, and kind of moving forward using the work from your book? Because, the information in your book I found to be so profound, and I think they would really make an impact for our listeners.
I'm happy to. I'm trying to think which one. I have two came in at the same time. So one of them I'm thinking about was a very talented woman who was really stuck. And this person was pursuing a goal in the entertainment world and had a lot of connections, talent, had grown up actually in the entertainment world and kept getting stuck and not wanting to do the work of promoting herself. She was quite talented, but she just could not bear to do the following up with agents or getting material to the varying theaters and that kind of stuff. And so we, for a long time, went and to the different selves, what selves are having trouble with that? Are there any parts of you that would be initiating parts in terms of the business? And they'd be there, but ultimately it just never happened. And so at one point we went to this very tiny but strong self. And this self said that she felt that the client was actually focusing on the wrong thing. And this self said, she's not going to, these are deficits of hers. She's never going to be good at this. And I think we're wasting time. And so I'm not, you think I'm the enemy. I'm the one stopping her, but I'm not. You're wasting time trying to do things that she's just not going to do. It's not going to work. Like, all right, because you take these parts seriously, and it was a surprise to both of us. Then when we went back to center, we realized, all right, well, what are the strengths? And she ended up shifting the focus of what she does, but she's still doing something creative, but it doesn't demand what the entertainment world demands. And she's flowering. She's on her second book. She's got a well-known podcast. And it's all because this self actually said, we're on the wrong track. It's not about gaining skills in an area she doesn't thrive in. It's let's support where she thrives. And now she's just she's so happy.
And that's really the ultimate goal, is to get to this place of personal fulfillment,
Yes.
where you have the work experience, life experience that you're dreaming of.
Exactly.
So, for our listeners that, we've gone over so much, but there's still an amazing amount of information in your book. What do you want our listeners to take away from your book?
What I'd like listeners to take away from the final eighth and list your inner selves to achieve your goals is that you are much more than you think you are. And visiting and learning about yourselves activates capacity so far beyond your intellect and your logic that it's really empowering. And I think of the final eighth process as an inner lifestyle change.
I love that. We're in this time where people, there are many people who don't have jobs, and there are people who are looking to redefine themselves and find what makes them happy. And what a great head start having the final eighth will put them on that path with.
I agree, because the other gift of that is that many people have more time to go inward and then change their outward. And the final eighth is so good about that, including giving courage in this wild time that maybe that dream that's been dormant actually is now can be nurtured and materialize, and sooner than you think.
Yeah, it's really, it really is a personal journey. My goodness, Bridgit, I mean, we could talk for days. I so just love your book, The Final Eighth. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
thefinal8th.com will get you to lots of places, or Googling my name, Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, because we're on all the social media and I've got websites. And every third Thursday of the month, I do a free voice dialogue basic session facilitation so that people can see what it looks like. And so anyone's welcome to contact me, and I'll give them the Zoom info for that closer to the time.
Oh, that sounds like an exciting thing to be a part of. My goodness. Well, Bridgit, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Bridgit. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Final Eighth. Enlist your inner selves to accomplish your goals. The Final Eighth is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to connect with Bridgit, you can at final8th.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.